Welcome back to Boring Science for Sleep. If you enjoy these quiet workday visits, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing. Tonight we're spending a full day with a toll collector on a rural turnpike road in northern England in the 1860s. Before sunrise, you unlock a small stone gatehouse and let in the first cold air of the road. You count copper and silver into neat piles, check the tariff board, and test the gate chain for a smooth lift. Then the morning traffic begins. Milk carts, farm wagons, and a post rider, each one met with the same greeting and the same entry in the ledger. A wheelwright mentions the river bridge is under repair, and you quietly prepare for the diverted flow to pass your window all day. You set out extra coin trays, hang a small sign asking for exact change, and keep your pen ready between gate lifts. And later, when the worn chain link finally fails, what temporary method will let you stop carts safely while still recording every passage in penny? The stone of the gatehouse holds the night's chill, and your breath shows briefly in the lamplight. You set the ledger open to a fresh page, and you smooth it with your palm as if it were cloth. The ink bottle sits close to the stove, not for comfort, but so it won't thicken in the cold. Outside, the turnpike road is still more shadow than shape, a dark strip between hedges wet with dew. You listen for the first wheel long before you see it, because sound reaches you sooner than sight. And this morning, the sound comes earlier and closer together than it did yesterday. A far-off rattle becomes two rattles, then a steady clop of hooves behind it. That's the bridge repair beginning to make itself known, not with words, but with traffic. You make a quick, quiet decision and pull the extra coin trays nearer the window slot. You also turn the small, exact change if you please sign outward, so it catches the first grey light. It's a polite request, but it's also a way to keep the day from piling up at your doorstep. The first milk cart stops with the soft hiss of wood and iron as the wheels settle. The driver is bundled in a coat that smells faintly of hay and stable, and he's already tired. He nods once, not unfriendly, just economical, and you answer with the same economy. You lift the timber arm with the chain, you feel the familiar weight, and you hear the smooth run of links. He drops a few coppers into your palm, cold and damp from his pocket. You glance at the tariff board, not because you've forgotten, but because the ritual keeps you steady. You write the entry, cart, milk, 1 horse, proper toll paid, and a mark beside it. Then the gate comes down again, and the cart moves on, the churns clinking softly in the back. Before you can warm your fingers on the kettle, the next wagon rolls up, heavier, slower. It's a farm wagon with sacks, and the sacks are tied down with rope darkened by many hands. You step out to the threshold because you can hear there's a second wagon behind it. 2 at once means you'll need to move like a hinge, open, take, right, close, and repeat. You lift the arm, and you keep your other hand away from the chain because pinched skin is an easy mistake. The farmer pays in silver, and you set the coin in a separate tray with a muted clink. You don't look at his face for long, but you catch the detail of his cap and the mud on his boots. Those details matter later, when someone says they paid, and you need your memory to have something to hold. You write, farm wagon, 2 wheels, loaded, 1 horse, and you keep the phrasing the same as always. The second wagon inches up as the first clears the arm. This one carries empty crates, but the axles creak as if they've had a hard week. You take the lighter rate because the rules are made for the road's wear as much as for fairness. Every heavy load grinds the surface, and the trust pays to mend it. Stone, gravel, and labor. That's what the toll is, in the simplest sense. A way of turning passing weight into future repairs. When you set the gate down, you feel the arm's slight shudder, a tiny complaint in the timber. You notice it, and you file it away, because small complaints become big ones if ignored. A post rider comes next, quick and sharp, with the look of someone carrying other people's time. He doesn't want to stop, but he does, because the gate makes everyone equal for a moment. He holds out the proper coin without a word, and you give him the smallest nod you can manage. You lift, he passes, and already you're writing post, single horse, paid. The entry is short, but it matters all the same. The ledger isn't only money, it's proof that the road was used, and by whom and when. This morning, you're already filling the page faster than your hand prefers. So you shift the ledger slightly, and you place a scrap of blotting paper at the ready. That's another small decision, meant to prevent smears when you have to close the book quickly. The next cluster arrives like a string of beads, 3 wagons, then a gap, then another 2. The bridge repair has pushed the day toward you, and your gatehouse becomes its narrow throat. You begin to recognize the pattern. The diverted drivers come in groups, because they follow one another's knowledge. One man sees another turn here, and he turns too, trusting the road to be passable. With each stop, you speak the same few words, and your voice finds a steady level. You ask what they're carrying, you match it to the board, and you name the toll plainly. Most pay without trouble because the toll is expected like rain, but a few pause, and you feel the pause like a stone in your shoe. One driver pats his pockets too long, and he looks at your exact change sign with a tired sort of irritation. You don't argue. You simply open your coin tray, show him you can make change, and you do it with slow care. It costs you time, and time is the one thing you can't pile neatly. So when the next driver arrives with exact coppers ready, you feel a quiet gratitude you don't show. You just take the coins and write the entry and lift the gate again. A thin line of daylight begins to show in the east, and the road surface turns from black to brown. The stones in the turnpike glint where the wheels have polished them, and the ruts hold water. You watch the wheels pass through those ruts, and you imagine the trust's surveyor with his measuring rod. He'll want receipts, he'll want totals, he'll want to know the day is being kept properly, even when it grows busy. So you keep your handwriting steady, even when your wrist starts to ache. You keep the entries uniform, because uniform entries are harder to dispute. By the time the sun is properly up, you've already used more ink than usual. You refill the pen, and you wipe the nib carefully, because a blot is like a stumble in a dance. Another wagon arrives, this one with wider axles, and you notice it before you see the load. Wider axles mean a different rate, because they spread weight differently, and the rules try to reflect that. You step a little closer, and you look at the hubs, the ironwork, the way the wheels sit. The driver watches you, and there's a moment where he wonders if you're looking for trouble. You aren't. You're looking for accuracy, which is softer than suspicion, but can feel the same to a stranger. You tell him the rate, you point to the board, and you keep your tone even. He pays, and the tension drains away as quickly as it came, replaced by the normal sound of money. You write, 4-wheel wagon, wide axle, loaded, paid. And as you close the gate, you hear a different kind of sound. Not wheel or hoof, but the scuff of boots. A man on foot approaches, leading a small drove of sheep, their hooves clicking like scattered pebbles. Droves have their own line on the tariff board, because animals wear the road too, in their way. You open the gate wide, and you stand aside, letting the flock flow past like a living stream. The man counts under his breath, and you count with your eyes, matching his rhythm. It's easy to lose a number when the animals bunch and then stretch out again. So you make another decision, and you count in groups, 5s and 10s, letting the pattern hold. When the last sheep passes, you collect the toll, and you mark the entry, drove, number counted, paid. The day has settled into a quickened rhythm, but it's still a rhythm, and that's a comfort. You learn the order of your movements again, hand to chain, hand to coin, hand to pen. The stove gives off a low warmth, not enough to make you sleepy, just enough to keep your fingers working. You pour a little tea into a tin cup, and you hold it close for a few seconds. You don't drink much yet, because the next wheels are already coming. Then, amid the ordinary faces and loads, one man offers something that makes you slow down. He slides a token across the sill, instead of a coin. Brass, worn smooth at the edges. It's the kind of exemption token some trusts issue, meant for specific persons or purposes. You've been warned about them, not in a dramatic way, but in a clerk's careful hand. Reused tokens, old stamps, men who pass them off as current, hoping you're too hurried to notice. You keep your face neutral and you pick up the token as if it were simply another coin. It's worn from his pocket and it smells faintly of metal and cloth. You turn it in the light and you look for the stamp, the little mark that should match the year. The stamp is there, but it's not quite right. Not wrong enough to call a man a liar, but not right enough to ignore. This is a moment where you can choose sharpness or you can choose method. You choose method. You reach beneath the bench and bring out your reference card, a small printed guide the trust provided. You hold the token beside it and you compare the shapes, the spacing, the tiny flaws that printers leave. Then you ask the man his name, softly, as if it's only for your book. He gives it a little stiff, and you repeat it back, making it sound ordinary. You also glance at his wagon, and you note the maker's mark on the ironwork, a detail that doesn't lie. You write his name, the token presented, and the wagon description without accusation, just record. Then you tell him, kindly, that you'll accept the token for now, but you must note it for the clerk. He exhales, and his shoulders drop, because he's been expecting a fight and found none. He goes through, and the line begins to move again. But the brief slowing has consequences. 2 wagons have arrived behind him, and now they're waiting, their horses shifting and snorting in the cold air. You lift the gate again, and you feel the chains pull, a little harsher than before. You tell yourself you'll oil it later when there's a gap. You collect, you write, you lower. Collect, write, lower. The repetition is calming, but it's also what makes wear invisible until it isn't. By mid-morning, your hands carry the mixed smell of iron, ink, and coin. Your fingertips are lightly grey, and you wipe them on a rag that's already stained from yesterday. A light wind comes through the open hatch, bringing in the scent of wet earth and crushed leaves. You pull your coat tighter, but you keep the hatch open because you need to hear the road. Hearing is as important as seeing when your back is turned to write. A heavier wagon approaches, and you hear it in the slow groan of its load. When it stops, the horse's harness creaks, leather rubbing leather in a patient way. The driver says he's carrying timber, and you look past him to the stacked lengths, strapped down. Timber has its own rate too, because it's long and awkward, and it makes the road work to carry it. You tell him the toll, and he pays in a handful of coppers that smell of sweat. You count them twice, not to insult him, but to keep your totals clean. Then you stack the coins, and you set them into the tray, and you write the entry. In the quiet moments between wagons, you add small column totals at the side of the page. Not the full reckoning, just little sums to keep you anchored. If the day becomes chaotic later, those little sums will be the rope you hold on to. A boy passes by with a basket, delivering something to a nearby cottage, and he slows to watch you work. You nod at him, and he nods back, as if you're both on duty in different ways. Then he's gone, and the road returns to its steady demands. Another cluster arrives, and this time the men are talking among themselves about the bridge repair. You catch fragments, planks, scaffolding, a temporary ford, a mason who's fallen behind. None of it is your business, but all of it shapes your day. Because if the bridge is closed longer than expected, you'll see this diverted traffic again tomorrow. And if the trust doesn't repair your chain soon, tomorrow could be harder. That thought sits quietly in the back of your mind, like a tool left on a bench. A carriage arrives, lighter than wagons but faster, with a driver who keeps his eyes forward. Carriages pay too, and the people inside often act as if they shouldn't have to. This one slows at the last moment, and the driver flicks his reins with mild impatience. You lift the gate, and you hold out your hand for the toll, keeping your posture calm. He pays in silver, and you make change without comment, because comment would be wasted breath. As the carriage passes, the air briefly fills with the smell of damp wool and polished leather. Then it's gone, and the gate comes down, and your world narrows again to the window, the chain, the page. You glance at the chain's lower link as it settles. You see a faint mismatch, an old repair. One link, a slightly different shape. It's a small thing, easy to overlook, but now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You make a decision to test the lift more gently, using steady force instead of quick jerks. That choice costs you a second each time, but it's meant to save you trouble later. The trouble doesn't always listen, but you still do what you can. Late in the morning, you take a longer sip of tea, and you feel the warmth move down into your chest. You keep the cup near, ready to set it down fast, because another wagon is already arriving, and behind it, another, and another. The road is now fully awake. It's a worked road, earning its keep, and you are the one who makes the earnings legible. You turn the page in the ledger, careful not to smear the last line. The fresh page looks almost too clean, and you take comfort in that blank space. You set the nib down, and the first new line begins the way it always does, with a date in words and a simple description. The sound outside keeps moving even while you write. A wagon rolls up so close you can hear the grit shift under its tires. You lift your eyes, and you see a pair of horses this time. Broad backs, steaming lightly. 2 horses usually means a heavier pull, and a heavier pull usually means a heavier toll. You step to the hatch, and you let your voice carry just far enough to reach the driver. He tells you it's stone for the bridge work, and he says it like it should explain everything. It does explain a lot. It explains why the road is busy, and why the wagons are loaded to the brim, and why the men's patience is thinner. You glance at the wheels, at the iron tires, at the way the hub sits in the light. You name the rate without apology, because you're not the one who ordered the stone. The driver pays in mixed coin, and you sort it with a practiced thumb, copper to copper, silver to silver. One coin is slicker than the rest, worn smooth by years of palms. You write the entry with the same steady wording you'd use for milk or hay. Loaded wagon, 4 wheels, 2 horses, stone, toll paid. The gate arm rises and falls again, and each time you feel that repaired link in the chain hesitate. It doesn't fail, but it doesn't move like the others either. You begin to lift with a slower pull, letting the chain take its strain evenly. That means each stop lasts a breath longer. And when you're taking tolls one after another, one breath becomes a line. A small queue forms, not dramatic, just a patient stacking of wagons in the road. Horses shift their weight. A man clears his throat. A wheel creaks as someone rolls forward a half turn to close the gap. You keep going, because the only way out is through the same simple actions: lift, take, count, write. Lower, one of the next drivers has an extra set of wheels behind, a small cart hitched to the main wagon. The tariff board has a line for extra wheels, and you touch the edge of the board with a fingertip. Not to show off, just to point to where the rule lives. He squints, then nods, and pays without complaint. You can tell he's already had enough arguing for one day, probably not even about tolls. You mark it carefully, because extra wheels are the kind of detail that gets questioned later. If the totals look high, someone will want to know why. Your answer will be right there in ink. A small comfort arrives in the shape of a familiar face. It's a local carrier you've seen for years, and his wagon has a dented iron strap on the left side. You recognize the strap before you recognize the man. He gives you a look that says, "Busy day." You give him a look back that says, "Yes," and it'll be busier still. He pays with exact coin, neatly counted out, and you feel a soft relief in your chest. Exact coin is like a door that opens without sticking. You write his entry, and you add a tiny mark you'll understand later. Local, not official, just your own quick note. By late morning, the stove has warmed the stone a little, but the hatch keeps letting the cold in. You can feel the temperature change each time you lean toward the opening. Warm at your back, cool on your knuckles. The air smells of damp wool, horse sweat, and the faint sharpness of iron. Your rag is darker now, and you fold it and fold it again to find a cleaner corner. You wipe the pen nib and you set it down with care. Even your tools need a gentle hand today. A man walks up beside a cart instead of sitting atop it. That tells you something before he speaks. If he's walking, the cart is heavy, or the road is soft, or the horse is old. He asks for the lighter rate, saying he's only carrying empty barrels. You look at the barrels, stacked on their sides, and you listen to the way the cart settles. Empty barrels have a hollow sound, and they sit higher. These sit low. You don't accuse him. You just ask, calmly, if you can tap one. He hesitates, then shrugs like it doesn't matter. You tap the nearest barrel with a knuckle, and the sound is dull, not hollow. It's a small test, almost nothing, but it tells the truth, gently. You name the proper rate again, still even, still quiet. He grumbles, but he pays. And the grumble fades into the road noise as he moves on. You write the entry, barrels, loaded, paid, and you add a note in the margin, not for spite, but for clarity. The flow doesn't let up. The diverted traffic comes in waves, and you begin to sense the waves by ear. A distant rumble becomes a near clatter, then a brief lull, then another rumble. In the lull, you take 3 sips of tea, and you swallow them slowly. The tea has gone a little stewed in the tin, but it's warm and it does its job. You set the cup down where it won't be knocked over by your sleeve. You've learned to keep your small world arranged so nothing falls. The road's work is not only money and writing, sometimes it's measuring. A wagon pulls up with a load that hangs wider than the wheels, bundles of brushwood tied and sticking out. The rules care about width because a wide load forces other traffic to the edge of the road. The edge is softer and it breaks down first. You step out far enough to see the full span. You don't need a tape. Your eyes have learned the width of a normal cart the way a baker learns the size of a loaf. You tell him the rate for a wide load and you keep your voice steady. He starts to argue, not with anger, more with habit. You point to the board again. The board doesn't change its mind, and neither do you. He pays, and you write, wide load, brushwood, paid. Around this time, you begin to feel the ache in your writing hand deepen. It's not sharp. It's a slow complaint like wood swelling with damp. You change your grip slightly, and you flex your fingers when you can. You also begin to write a fraction larger, just to keep the lines from turning cramped. Cramped handwriting leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to disputes. And disputes lead to raised voices at a little stone gatehouse that would rather stay quiet. A sound comes that isn't wood and iron. It's the steady, deliberate footfall of a man who isn't in a hurry. You look up and see the parish surveyor, coat buttoned, hat brim dark with damp. He carries a small leather case, and in his hand is a folded paper. He nods once, and you nod back, because you know what he's here for. The road is his concern, and your ledger is one of his tools. He asks how the morning's gone, and you answer simply, busier than usual, bridge diversion. He looks down the road at the line of tracks and hoof prints, reading the surface like a page. Then he asks to see your receipts and your entries, not harshly, just as part of the day. You invite him in because there's no point doing this work if you can't show it. Inside the gatehouse, the air is warmer and the smell of ink is clearer. The surveyor's boots leave a darker mark on your stone floor, and you notice it without judgment. Mud comes with roads. He sets his case on the bench, careful, as if he respects the little space you've made. You open the ledger to the new page, and you keep your finger at the top line so he sees you haven't skipped. Then you show him the receipt book, the stubs still attached, each one a small twin to a payment. He asks about your totals, and you show the small column sums you've been adding in the margin. That earns you a slight nod, not praise, just recognition that you're keeping ahead of the day. He also asks to see the cash box. That's the iron box kept under the bench, out of sight, because temptation is a quiet thing. You slide it out with your foot and lift it up with both hands. It's heavier now than it was at dawn. The weight is real, and it's also symbolic. a day turning into metal. You show him the lock, and you show him the key on your string. He doesn't ask you to open it yet. He only wants to know it's there, and secured, and treated properly. You set it back under the bench with a gentle push. As you're doing this, a wagon stops outside, and you hear the driver call out. The surveyor pauses, letting you do your job. You step to the hatch and lift the gate, and you take the coin, and you make the entry. Then you return to the surveyor, and the two worlds connect again. This is what your work is like, always between road and office, between traveller and trust, between the sound of wheels and the scratch of pen. The surveyor asks how you handle odd cases, loads that don't fit neatly on the board. You tell him, softly, that you measure what you can, and you write what you do. You explain that you keep the wording consistent, so a week later, the entry still makes sense. He listens the way a man listens when he has to answer to someone above him. Then he asks about exemptions, and you show him the note you made about the worn token. You don't call it fraud, you call it token presented, to be checked. He looks at your writing, then at you, and gives another small nod. He says the trust has been hearing about reused tokens, and your note will help. It's not dramatic. It's just the slow machinery of paperwork catching up to human habit. The surveyor steps back outside with you, and he watches as you take 2 more tolls. He's watching the process, not just the numbers. He sees how you keep your hand away from the chain when you lift. He sees how you look at wheels and axles before you speak. He sees how you keep your voice level, even when a driver sighs loudly. These things aren't written down in the trust's rules, but they're part of the work. Then the surveyor's attention shifts to the road surface itself. He kneels briefly, touches the edge where wheels have pushed gravel aside, and he stands again with a faint grimace. He tells you there will be more repairs needed this winter, especially if these diverted wagons keep coming. You don't argue, you just keep collecting. Because your job isn't to decide, your job is to record what happens so decisions can be made. A carrier pulls up and calls out that his wagon is empty. He says it quickly, like a charm that should open gates. The surveyor is still nearby, and you can feel the carrier's eyes flick to him, then back to you. This is the kind of moment that can grow teeth if you let it. So you keep it soft. You look at the wagon, and you notice the axles sit low. The springs don't rest right for an empty bed. You also notice a faint dust at the seams of the boards, pale, like flour. You ask him what he carried earlier, and he says, "Nothing today, only going to fetch a load." You nod as if you believe him, because you don't need to force a confession. You step closer and put your hand lightly on the side plank. Then you give it a small tap, listening. The sound is dense, not the hollow sound of empty space. You glance at the corner where a sack has rubbed, leaving a faint smear. Flour finds a way to show itself. You name the proper rate, the one for a loaded wagon. You don't raise your voice. You don't point at him like a judge. You only point at the board, and then at the wagon, and then back to your ledger. He grumbles, the same way the earlier barrelman grumbled, as if the world has inconvenienced him personally. But the surveyor's presence makes him careful. He pays. The coins hit your palm with a firm, resigned weight. You count them once, then again, then you write the entry with a calm hand. Loaded, flour sacks by sign, paid. The carrier drives on, and his complaint fades behind him, swallowed by distance and the next wagon's rumble. The surveyor watches him go, then looks at you. He says quietly that you handled it well, not as praise to warm you, but as confirmation that the trust's rules are being applied without fuss. He tells you to keep noting unusual loads, and to keep doing your small margin sums. Then he tips his hat and walks on down the road, toward the section he came to inspect. His boots make the same steady sound as before, and then that sound is gone too. With the surveyor gone, the Gatehouse feels like yours again. Not owned exactly, but inhabited. You go back to the rhythm, and the rhythm welcomes you because it has no opinion. Another wagon, another toll, another line of ink. You begin to notice how you recognize regulars by hardware, a certain blacksmith's clamp on a wheel rim, a particular shape of rain ring, a patch on a tarp sewn with thick white thread. These are like signatures that don't need writing. The morning leans toward midday and the light changes. It becomes flatter, less silver, more pale gold. The damp on the road begins to lift, and the smell shifts from wet earth to dry dust and crushed stone. You wipe the sill with your rag, and the rag comes away gritty. Grit is part of the job too, the constant fine proof of passage. You take out your bread and cheese because hunger is no respecter of traffic. You plan to eat sitting down, but the wagons keep coming, and you know better than to fight the day. So you take bites standing, and you chew while you write. You keep your mouth closed when you speak, to keep crumbs from embarrassing you. You swallow tea that's gone lukewarm, and you keep one ear on the road, because the next wheels are always arriving. A faster sound comes from the far end, a carriage moving with purpose. You can hear it in the quick rhythm of hooves and the lighter rattle of its frame. It approaches without the slow courtesy of heavy wagons. The driver expects a quick lift. You feel the pressure of that expectation even from a distance. You step to the chain and put your hand on it, ready. You also glance at that mismatched link again, because you can't help it now. It's like a loose tooth you keep touching with your tongue. The carriage comes in, and it slows late, too late for comfort, but not late enough to stop. You pull the chain to lift the timber arm quickly, trying to satisfy speed without losing control. The chain takes the strain. For a fraction of a second, everything is normal. Then you hear it. A sharp clink, too clean to be a hoof or a coin, and the pull in your hand suddenly goes wrong, slack where there should be weight. The timber arm drops crooked, not all the way, but enough to twist. The broken end of the chain swings, and the sound of metal against wood rings in the small space. The carriage is already moving, and the driver doesn't fully understand what happened. He slips through the gap, not stopping, not paying, because momentum has carried him. And behind him, a cart rolls forward, seeing an opening where there shouldn't be one. Your stomach tightens, not with fear, but with the sudden crack in the day's accounting. When the gate works, the road pauses. When the gate fails, the road forgets you exist. You raise your hand and call out, not shouting, but firm enough to cut through wheel noise. The cart driver pulls up short, confused, and the horse tosses its head at the unexpected stop. You step out quickly, and you put your palm up again, a clear signal. Then you look at the gate arm. It's resting at an angle, the chain broken at that old repaired link, the mismatched iron finally giving up. You can see the bright torn metal where it snapped, clean as a fresh break. The line behind is still coming. You can hear it, and now you can feel it, the day pressing forward without waiting. You make a decision that isn't written on any tariff board. You move your body to become part of the barrier. You take hold of the timber arm with both hands, and you brace it, pushing it back toward its proper position. It's heavier without the chain taking the load. The weight goes into your shoulders. You set your feet carefully on the gritty stone because slipping would make everything worse. You manage to swing the timber across enough to block the lane again, but you can't lock it there. Without the chain, it wants to swing back, like a door with no latch. You look around quickly, and your eyes land on a wooden wheel chock, a wedge you keep for stopping wagons while you count. You grab it and jam it against the base of the gate post, creating friction where iron used to do the work. It's not elegant, but it holds, for the moment. The waiting driver, the one you stopped, watches you with a mixture of impatience and sympathy. He asks if you're all right. You say yes, and you keep your voice level, because calm is also a kind of tool. You keep one hand on the timber, and you let the other hand come free to work. You ask the driver, in the same tone you use for tolls, what he's carrying today. He tells you it's sacks of oats, headed for a mill beyond the bend. You nod once, because the load doesn't change the problem, but it changes the entry. You step back toward the hatch, still keeping your body between the road and the broken gate. With the chain gone, you can't lift and drop from the safe spot inside, So you do it the older way, the way a man does when iron fails and work continues. You hold the timber arm across with your shoulder, and you reach out for the coin with your free hand. The driver leans forward, careful not to startle the horse, and he places the money into your palm. The coins are warmer than the morning's first coppers, warmed by pockets and time. You count them quickly, because the line behind him is still arriving in sound. Then you turn your head just enough, and you speak the short permission that means he can pass. He clicks his tongue, the horse steps, and the wagon rolls by the timber as if threading a needle. As soon as his wheels clear, you swing the arm back into place by sheer weight and habit. The wooden chock scrapes on stone as it takes the strain. It holds again, but the hold feels like a hand cramp, strong now, uncertain later. You look down at the broken chain end, and you see the mismatched link that finally split. It's not only snapped, it's been suffering for a long time. One side of the tear is bright metal, and the other is darkened, old fatigue made visible. The trust had mended it once, with whatever link fit that day. Now that small economy has become your afternoon. You step back inside, not to hide, but to keep the work recorded. The ledger lies open, and the ink waits without patience. You write the oats wagon entry as cleanly as if nothing happened. Then you add a new note in the margin, where the day's trouble can't be missed. You write, gate chain failed at midday, passage controlled by hand, temporary stop set. It isn't poetry. It's a lifeline for your totals later. Outside, another wagon has already reached the crooked arm. This driver has seen the break, and he slows early, wary. That small caution helps you, because you can't afford last-second surprises now. You step out again, and you raise your palm, a simple sign that asks for stillness. The horse stops. The harness creaks. The wagon rocks once, settling into the rut, and then becomes quiet. You notice in that moment how much of your old day depended on the gate doing the asking for you. The timber used to speak. Now you speak. You take the toll, you name it plainly, and you return to write. Each trip from threshold to ledger feels like a pendulum swing. Out to the road, back to the book. Out again, back again. And with every swing you're aware of the small gap you leave the road unattended. So you shorten your entries just slightly, without losing meaning. You keep the same order of words, so your eye can skim later without effort. The next wagon is a heavy one, with iron tires that ring more sharply over stone. You hear it before it stops, and you know it'll need more room to halt. You step farther into the lane, not brave, just practical. You lift your hand sooner, and you call out a quiet, steady, hold there, if you please. The driver draws back, and the team slows with that patient reluctance of animals working. When it's still, you walk to the side, and you look at the load, barrels again, bound with hoops that have seen many roads. This time the barrels do sound hollow when you tap the rim, you charge the lighter rate, and you don't even mention the earlier argument. The man pays, grateful for fairness that doesn't keep score of pride. You let him pass, guiding his wheels around the crooked angle of the timber. As he goes through, you keep your eyes on the rear wheel because that's where catches happen. It clears. You breathe out, slow, and you set the arm back across. The chock holds. But the timber wants to drift, a finger's width at a time. You wedge the chock tighter with your boot. The wood compresses, and you know it won't last forever. For a moment you consider closing altogether, even now, even before dusk. But the rules are not yours alone. The trust expects collection, the road expects passage, and you, standing in the middle, are expected to make it possible. So you choose the middle path. You keep the road moving, but you start writing a second kind of entry. Not just toll paid, but also notes about the fault, because already one carriage has slipped through. And you can't pretend it didn't. You turn to a fresh line and write, one carriage passed during fault, no payment taken, time about midday. You don't know the owner, you don't know the destination, but you can still tell the truth about what happened. That honesty is the only thing that makes the rest of the page believable. Traffic continues, diverted and clustered. And now you work with a new rhythm. You don't lift, you don't drop, you hold, you wave, you take, you release. Your shoulder begins to feel the timber's weight, a dull pressure deepening with each passage. You change sides, shifting the strain from one muscle group to another. You keep your movements slow and clear, because quick motions spook horses, and spooked horses create delays that your broken gait can't handle. A pair of boys appears at the roadside, drawn by the change in routine. They stand back, not interfering, but watching as if your work has become a small show. You don't scold them. Instead, you use them. You ask one, politely, to stand near the hedge and call out when another wagon crests the rise. He nods, proud to have a task, and he takes up his post like a tiny lookout. That gives you a few seconds more warning each time, and a few seconds is sometimes the difference between order and muddle. When the boy calls, "Wagon coming," you finish the entry you're on. You cap the ink, you step out, you raise your palm, and you become once again the thing that stops the road. As the day reaches its fullest light, the damp in the stone gatehouse begins to shift. The air is still cool but less wet. Your ink dries a little faster. That should feel like relief. But it also means dust rises more easily from the road. It drifts into the hatch, fine and pale, and settles on the ledge's margin. You brush it away with the side of your hand, leaving a faint smear like chalk. The dust and the ink mix on your skin. Your hands smell like coin, timber, and old iron. You take another bite of bread because you need it and because chewing gives you a moment's pause. You eat standing as planned now by necessity. The cheese is firm and slightly sharp. It feels like fuel, not pleasure. The road doesn't give you time to linger over taste. A wagon approaches with a familiar maker's mark on the ironwork, a local wagon wright's curled stamp. That familiarity matters. When you can't rely on iron to hold the gate, you rely on people to hold their part. The driver is a man you've collected from before. He slows early, and he doesn't make you ask twice. He holds up the exact coins between finger and thumb, ready. You accept them, and you say, "Settle with you later, if need be, only if you must." He shakes his head, "No need," and passes on. That tiny exchange is a stitch in the day's fabric, keeping it from tearing wider. Not everyone is like that. A stranger arrives next. A tall wagon with a fresh painted sideboard, letters you don't recognize. The driver looks at your crooked timber, then at you, as if measuring whether rules still apply. You keep your face calm. You keep your hand up until his horse stops. Only then do you step close enough for money to pass. He offers a coin and a question at the same time. He asks if the toll is even lawful, with the gate in this state. It's not a cruel question. It's a practical one, asked by someone who trades in loopholes. You answer the practical way. You tell him the toll is for the road's upkeep and the tariff board is still posted. You tell him you're recording every passage and he'll be given a receipt if he wants one. You don't argue about law. You argue about procedure, because that's what you can prove. He huffs and pays and moves on. But you watch his rear wheels carefully, because a man who questions rules often tests them. His wheels clear, the chock holds. You set the timber back across again and feel the strain in your forearm. Your body is becoming the chain. That thought comes quietly and sits there, heavy but not dramatic. It's simply true. You make another note, not because you enjoy writing trouble, but because trouble needs a place to live. You write, "Gate secured by chock and hand control. Traffic slowed. No further loss observed." Observed is your word of choice. It admits you can't see everything, but it says you're trying. In the early afternoon, a man arrives who doesn't stop at the gatehouse at all. He approaches from the side, along the hedge, stepping around puddles and ruts. He carries a small satchel and a folded letter. At first you think he's another surveyor, but his clothes are too plain for that, and his pace is too hesitant. He's a messenger, or someone like it, sent by a nearby cottage or farm. He asks quietly if you can spare a strip of paper. You look at your receipt book. Paper is not endless here. But you also look at your broken chain and you think of the trust clerk in town. You need help, not muscle help. And maybe, if the trust is wise, replacement iron. Show you tear a small sheet from a spare pad, and you dip your pen. You write a short note in plain words. Gate chain snapped at repaired link, unable to secure barrier, collecting by hand, request guidance and replacement chain. You add the date, spoken and written, and you sign your name. Then you fold it, and you hand it to the messenger. He tells you he's headed toward the town anyway, and he can drop it at the clerk's office. You give him a penny for the trouble, because small errands deserve payment too. He nods, tucks the note into his satchel, and disappears down the lane. That act feels like placing a weight on a scale, not solving the problem, but acknowledging it properly. The afternoon continues with the same steady demand. And now, with the note sent, you wait for the reply in the back of your mind. Waiting becomes part of the rhythm, like listening for wheels. A trusted local arrives, a woman in a small cart with a basket of goods. She's headed to market, and her pony is the sort that knows the road better than any map. She sees the broken chain hanging, and her eyes soften with understanding. She says, "You'll be sore tonight." You answer, in the same mild tone, that you'll manage. She pats her pocket, and then pauses. She has coin, but not enough small change for the exact rate. Normally, you'd make change without thinking. But now, with one hand always needed for the timber, your change making has become slower. And slower means longer stops. And longer stops mean more wagons bunching behind. So you make a new quiet tool. You begin issuing small handwritten slips for people you know well, people who pass often and settle fairly. You write her name, her route, the date, and the amount owed. You sign it with a quick line. She nods, takes the slip, and promises to pay on her return. You let her through, and you mark in the ledger, account given, to be settled. This is not ideal, but it keeps the road moving, and it keeps honesty in ink. A second familiar wagon comes, then a third. Each time, if change would slow you too much, you offer the slip. You keep the slips in a neat stack, weighted with a small stone so the draft won't scatter them. You also number them, one after another, so you can match them to the ledger later. 1, 2, 3, like stitches. Each slip is a promise made tangible. And because you're careful, the promises don't feel like risk so much as bookkeeping. Still, you only offer them to those you trust. To strangers, you require coin. That's not favoritism, you tell yourself. It's risk management, done quietly in the open air. A wagon arrives with a cloth cover, the canvas patched and stained. The driver says he's carrying tools. You look at the way the suspension sits, and you believe him. Tools are dense, and the wagon sits dense. You name the rate, he pays, and he passes. A second wagon follows, carrying baskets of something that smells faintly sweet. Apples, maybe, bruised and fermenting a little in the heat of the day. You take the toll, and for a moment the air is filled with fruit and horse and dust. Then it's gone again, replaced by the plain smell of road. By mid-afternoon, you begin to notice sounds more than sights. Your eyes are busy with coins and writing, but your ears become your warning bell. Iron tires make a higher ring. Leather-wrapped wheels make a softer thud. Bare wood makes a dry knock, like a mallet on a bench. You start predicting the kind of stop you'll need based on that sound alone. You hear iron, and you step out earlier. You hear leather, and you know the wagon will slow more gently. You hear bare wood, and you expect a wobble, and you prepare to guide. This listening becomes its own kind of skill, learned in one long afternoon. A traveling wagon appears that doesn't sound like any of the others. It squeaks in a rhythmic way, and something on it rattles like loose tins. When it comes into view, you see bright paint on the sideboards and a curved frame that suggests a small stage or booth. There are posters pasted to the wood, though rain has blurred the edges. The driver sits high, and beside him a man in a worn coat looks down at you with practiced confidence. A showman, not the loud kind, not here, not now, but the kind who's used to asking for exceptions. The wagon stops, and the showman leans down slightly. He says they're providing public entertainment, and that they ought to be exempt. He says it like a line he's used before, in other places, at other gates. You glance at the tariff board. There is wording, faded by weather, that mentions certain public services, but entertainment is not a clean category. Not like post, not like military, not like parish work. And your rule book, the small printed booklet you keep, is worn at the spine and soft at the corners. You open it anyway, carefully, because you can't afford to pretend. You flip to the section on exemptions. The print is small. The paper is thin. Your thumb leaves a faint grey mark where dust and ink have made you smudged. You read the line twice. It mentions persons on government service and certain agricultural movements and sometimes charitable events if endorsed, but nothing clear about a travelling show. The showman watches you read, and he smiles as if patience is his gift to you. Behind him, you can see faces inside the wagon's shadow, perhaps family, perhaps workers. A dog's nose appears briefly, then disappears. You keep your eyes on the showman's hands. One hand rests on the wagon rail. The other stays near his coat pocket, ready for whatever argument he prefers. You don't give him an argument, you give him time. You read the exemption lines once more, slowly, as if the small print might soften into clarity. It doesn't. So you choose the rule that keeps you safest. You charge the standard rate. You tell him, in a level voice, that you can't grant an exemption without written authority from the trust. You say it like weather, not like judgment. The showman's smile thins, but it doesn't vanish. He's met men like you before, the ones who won't be moved by charm. He asks which trust you answer to, and where the clerk sits, and how a man appeals. You answer each question plainly, as if you're describing the road itself. Behind him, someone shifts inside the wagon. A small metallic rattle answers, perhaps a box of fittings, perhaps a tin cup. The showman produces coin, slow enough to suggest reluctance, but clean enough to suggest he can afford it. You take it, and you count it once, then again, letting the counting be your boundary. You offer him a receipt stub if he wants one. That small square of paper is your quiet shield. He accepts it with a little nod, already imagining it in some future complaint. You write his wagon description carefully, bright paint, curved frame, posters, and you add claimed exemption for entertainment, toll taken pending Clerk. Then you step to the timber arm. You set your shoulder into it, and you ease it open just wide enough. You guide his front wheels around the crooked angle, watching the hub clear by a finger's width. He clicks his tongue, and the team moves, and the show wagon rolls through. As it passes, the air carries a mixed scent of damp canvas, straw, and something sweet, like cheap scent or sugared nuts. Then it thins back into dust and horse. You close the gap again with the timber, you wedge the chock, you feel the grain of the wood press under your palm, and you make another small note. Receipt issued. Possible appeal. No exemption granted without letter. The work keeps moving. A wagon arrives with a load of coal sacks, each one stamped with a yard name. You hear the sacks shift with a soft sliding sound, like heavy cloth on wood. You stop it early, because coal wagons take time to settle. The horses breathe hard, not panicked, just used. You name the rate, and the driver pays in copper, a small pile that smells faintly of sweat and leather. You stack the coins quickly, and you tuck them into the tray before they can spill. You write, coal, 4 wheels, 2 horses, paid. The word paid looks steady even when your arm feels less steady. A lull comes, not silence, but a thinning. It gives you room to look at the broken chain again. The snapped end hangs with a slight swing when the wind touches it. You can see the old repair clearly now. Mismatched links hammered shut in a hurry. You think of the trust's store of ironwork, somewhere in a town shed, tagged and counted. You think of requisitions and delays, and a clerk who prefers to stretch things one more season. In the gatehouse, the consequences are simple. Your shoulder aches, your attention stays stretched, and every cart depends on your raised palm. Another wagon crests the rise, and the boy lookout calls it out. His voice cracks slightly with pride and effort. You thank him with a nod, and you take your place in the lane again. You feel yourself moving like a signal post, planted, visible, plain. This wagon is a brewer's dray, lower and sturdier than a farm cart. The wheels are thick, and the bed sits heavy, as if built for city stones. The driver slows early, reading the broken gate and your posture. He's seen worse than this, you can tell, but he respects it. He pays with a larger coin and you have to make change. With one hand on timber, change becomes a careful dance. You set the coin on the sill. You slide back smaller pieces, one by one, so none can be questioned. You let him watch your fingers, because watching prevents complaint. Then you write the entry, brewer, dray, loaded, paid, change given. The words are simple, but they hold the moment in place. As the afternoon leans on, your stack of handwritten slips grows. They sit under the small stone paperweight, numbered in ink. You've made them neat on purpose, because neatness keeps you calm. You begin to see the day in two streams. Coin paid now, coin promised later. Both must end up in the same box and the same totals, and the same explanation for the clerk. That's the shape of your worry, quiet and constant. A familiar cart arrives again. The woman with the basket returning from market. This time she has the proper change ready, and she holds it up before you even ask. You smile, not broad, just a soft lift at the corner of your mouth. You take the coins, and you find her earlier slip in the stack. You cross it through with your pen and write settled. You keep the slip anyway because paper is memory. You mark the ledger line, account settled, slip number matched. That is how you turn trust into record. Another local stops, a man with a cart of fencing posts. He asks if he can pay both directions now to save trouble later. Normally you might refuse because rules like clean days. But this day isn't clean, so you agree, and you write it plainly. Paid for return passage, receipt given. The man nods, grateful. He passes on, and you feel the road's small cooperation, the way people adjust when they see a system under strain. Not everyone cooperates. A stranger comes next with a narrow face and a hard stare. He approaches too close, not stopping when you raise your hand. You step more fully into his path, not aggressive, just unavoidable. He reins in at the last moment, and the horse throws its head, annoyed. The man mutters something about broken gates and useless trusts. You let the mutter pass through you. You ask what he carries. He says nothing that concerns you. You look at the wagon bed anyway. You notice the fresh scrape marks on the boards and a few pale splinters. Something heavy was there recently. Something dragged. You name the toll based on the wagon, not his mood. You point, briefly, to the tariff board. It stands there, faded, but firm. He pays in a quick slap of coins onto the sill. One bounces, and you catch it before it falls. You pick it up, and you count the lot with the same calm pace as always. Then you write the entry as if he'd been polite. That's another boundary. When he passes, his rear wheel clips the timber lightly. The sound is a dull knock. Your stomach tightens again, because the timber is already twisted. You check it the moment the wagon clears. You run your hand along the edge and feel a roughened spot. A new splinter lifts under your fingertip. You take your pocket knife and shave the splinter down quick and careful. Not a repair, just a kindness to your own hands. Then you wipe the blade and put it away. You don't want blood in your work. Time moves in these small acts. Stop, count, write. Wedge, guide, release. Listen, then look. And always, in the back of it, waiting for the messenger to return from town. Waiting for paper to arrive that will tell you what you already suspect. The sun drops a little, and the light grows warmer. Dust looks more golden in the air. The hedges throw longer shadows across the ruts. A cart comes with geese in a crate. You hear them before you see them, a low complaining chorus. They smell like feathers and wet wood. You smile again, faintly, because some parts of work stay ordinary no matter what breaks. You collect the toll, and you write, poultry, small cart, paid. A man on horseback stops next, alone. He asks what happened to the chain, like he's asking about a neighbor's cough. You tell him, simply, worn link snapped. He nods and says, about time, then pays and rides on. That one sentence holds years of postponed maintenance. About time. The afternoon is getting tired. You can feel it in the horses, in the slower stops, in the way drivers stretch their backs when they halt. You can feel it in your own joints. Your shoulder has a constant ache now, and your writing hand cramps sooner. You shake it out when you can, and you keep the letters large and legible. The boy lookout has gone quiet. He's still there, but he leans against the hedge now, energy thinning. You tell him he can go if he likes. He hesitates, then asks if there'll be more wagons. You tell him yes, but less soon. He nods and trots off, duty finished. You're alone with the road again. The gatehouse feels small and the road feels wide. A distant sound appears, not wagon, not hoof, but footsteps running. You look up and you see the messenger coming back, breath puffing in the cooling air. He slows as he nears, and he holds up an envelope like a flag. It's folded paper with a blot of sealing wax, the trust clerk's mark. You accept it with a careful hand, because paper matters. You tuck it inside the gatehouse for a moment, because another cart is already approaching. Duty first. You stop the cart, you take the toll, you write the line. Then you step inside and break the seal. The clerk's hand is neat, a little tight. The words are brief, meant to travel. He writes that the standard rate you took from the showman is approved. He writes that no exemption is to be granted without a written order from the trustees. Then he addresses the broken gate. He instructs you to secure the road at dusk if the barrier can't be properly locked. If you cannot secure it, you are to post notice for travelers to pay at the next station, and to note all passages. He adds, almost as an afterthought, that a replacement chain will be discussed. Discussed is not the same as sent. You fold the letter and set it on the bench, under the paperweight, as if weight can make it more useful. You feel a quiet resignation. The clerk has given you authority, but not iron. Still, the approval matters. It means the showman can complain, but your page will stand. It means your choice was the safe one. You make a note in the ledger, clerk reply received. Showman charged correctly. Closure advised at dusk. Then you return to the road. Late afternoon traffic has changed shape. Fewer clusters now. More single wagons, spaced wider. The diverted flow is still there, but it's thinning as day work ends. That gives you room to begin the slow work of balancing. Not fully yet, but preparing. Between tolls, you add the columns again. Copper totals in one place, silver totals in another. You keep your sums small so your mind doesn't snag. You also lay out the handwritten slips and match them to the ledger lines. Slip 1, local woman, settled. Slip 2, fencing posts, owed. Slip 3, small cart, owed. You check each number and you speak it softly under your breath. 1, 2, 3. It keeps you steady. Now you come to the entries marked past during fault. The carriage that slipped. A second moment when you weren't sure, you make yourself face them. You write a short explanation at the bottom of the page. Gate chain failure, one carriage passed before stop was re-established. No toll collected. Then, no further uncollected observed. The phrasing is plain, and it tells the truth you can tell. As you count the coin trays, you notice how your fingers separate metals by feel now. Copper, slightly softer edges. Silver, colder, heavier. Your thumb knows the difference without thinking. You lift the iron cash box from under the bench, you set it on the table, and you open it with the key on the string. The lid creaks slightly, like a small door. Inside are compartments, and you begin placing coin in their proper spaces. You do it slowly. Rushing creates mistakes. Mistakes create questions. The box grows heavier, and the sound inside becomes a soft shifting, like pebbles. You keep your coins faced one way when you can, not for beauty, but because it makes counting quicker. Your tally in the ledger begins to take shape. You write totals in words. So many pence, so many shillings, so many half crowns. And then you find something that doesn't match your expectation. Your total comes up slightly over. Not under, over. At first you suspect your arithmetic. So you count again. You count with your finger on each coin. You count twice, then a third time. Still over, a small amount, but enough to matter, enough to require explanation. You sort through the silver again, slower. You look at each face, each worn profile. Most are familiar. But one coin catches the lamplight differently. It's not quite the right shade, not the bright clean silver you expect, but something with a grey cast. The edge milling is different too. You pick it up and hold it close. It's a foreign coin, not from your usual circulation. Maybe French, maybe Spanish. It's the kind of piece a traveler might carry without thinking. You remember, one payment earlier, made quickly. A driver in a hurry. Coin slapped onto the sill. You didn't question it then. It rang like silver. It looked like silver. But now, in the quiet of counting, it stands out. Its value is uncertain. You can't simply spend it later like the rest. This is another decision. Convenience or clarity? You choose clarity. You set the odd coin aside, separate from the compartments. You take your pen and write a note in the ledger. Odd foreign silver coin received, valued at nearest equivalent, set aside for Clerk. You don't decide its final worth, you only record what you did. That keeps your hands clean. You close the cash box and lock it again. The click of the lock is a small comfort, a finished sound. Outside, the road is still active but softer now. A cart passes without stopping, then hesitates when it sees the broken gate and your posture. You step out and raise your palm, and it stops. So the work continues even as you begin to put your house in order. The evening chill returns slowly, like a tide. The stone walls begin to feel cold again. The stove gives less warmth because you've fed it less. Fuel is money too. You take a moment to sweep grit from the threshold. A small broom, worn at the bristles, scrapes dust and straw into a thin line. You push it outside. The act feels like resetting a space. Then you oil the hinge points that still exist. A drop of oil on metal, a rag to wipe excess. It's maintenance done in miniature, a reminder of what the trust should have done in full. Each time you touch the gatepost, you feel the missing chain like a missing tooth. The timber still swings, but it doesn't obey. It's always ready to drift. The clerk's letter sits on your bench. Close at dusk if you can't secure. You begin thinking about what closure means without a proper latch. You look at the rope hanging on a peg. Coarse rope, used for tying bundles and securing odd things. You take it down and test it between your hands. It's rough, but sound. You imagine lashing the timber to the post. You imagine setting a lantern on the gate, so late travelers see the warning. You imagine a notice, handwritten, asking payment at the next station. You don't like the idea. Not because it's wrong, because it feels like admitting defeat. But the road at dusk is different from the road at noon. Light fades. Drivers grow tired. Stopping them by hand becomes harder, not easier. So you accept the clerk's instruction as the shape of your evening. You will try to close. If you can't close properly, you will close as best you can. The last hour of daylight brings a few more wagons. A farmer late from market, with a cart that smells of onions and damp sacks. A man with a bundle of cloth tied in oilskin. A boy on a pony, carrying a message. You take each toll. You write each line. You feel your own voice staying steady, even as your body tires. The showman's wagon is long gone now, but the receipt stub remains in your book, and the memory remains in your ledger. You've learned something about ambiguous rules today. When words are unclear, procedure becomes your anchor. As the sky begins to pale toward evening, you start preparing for the dusk closure in small steps. You place the lantern on the bench, you check the wick, you make sure there's oil enough for a few hours. You tear a sheet of paper, larger than a receipt, and you set it ready with your pen. Notice needs big letters. Big letters are easier to read in poor light. Between wagons, you practice the wording in your mind. Gate out of order. Pay at next station. Respectfully. That last word matters. A final cluster arrives. Not large, just 3 carts closed together. They look like men trying to beat nightfall. You feel it in their pace. You stop them one by one. You guide them around the crooked timber. You take their coins and write their entries. By the third, your shoulder feels like a stone. When they're gone, you stand for a moment with your hand on the gate post. You listen to the road's quieter sound. You listen to the hedges rustle. The wind brings you the faint smell of smoke from a distant cottage chimney. It also brings you the sound of one more set of wheels, farther off, but still coming. You look down at your hands on the post, and you see the fine grit stuck in the lines of your skin. Then you shift your weight, because you can't stand still for long, not when there's still road to manage. The clerk's instruction sits in your mind like a folded note you can't put down. Close at dusk if you can't secure. You take that to mean you should begin now, slowly, before the light truly fails. You step inside the gatehouse, and the stone room feels tighter after standing out in open air. You lift the lantern from the bench and check the glass again for soot. A clean lantern throws a steadier light, and steadier light makes people slow down. You trim the wick a little, just enough to keep it from smoking. The small scissors make a soft snick, and the action feels orderly. Then you set the lantern back down, and you take the rope from its peg. The rope is, I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. Coarse and dry, the kind that stiffens when it's been hanging in a warm room. You run it through your hands, feeling for frayed strands, and you find only a few rough hairs at the end. That's enough. A rope doesn't have to be pretty, it only has to hold. You step to the door and look at the gate arm in the slanting light. The timber sits a little off true, still obedient to gravity, still eager to drift. You picture where the chain used to keep it honest. Now you'll have to teach it a new honesty, with knots. You take the rope outside, and you lay it over the top of the gate arm. You choose the post where the chain used to anchor because the wood there is worn smooth by years of contact. Worn smooth means less bite, so you wrap the rope twice, letting friction do part of the work. You pull the rope tight until the fibers creak faintly, then you make a simple hitch, the kind you've used on parcels and bundles, steady and easy to undo in the morning. You test it with a push of your palm. The arm gives a fraction, then settles back, held. It isn't locked like iron, but it's no longer free to wander. You go back inside and light the lantern. The match flares, then steadies, and the wick catches with a soft sound like paper warming. You turn the knob until the flame is low but clear. Too high would smoke the glass again, and smoke makes a lantern look tired. You carry it out and hang it on the post at the edge of the lane, where a late driver will see it first. The light pools on the road surface, showing ruts and scattered stones. It also makes your gatehouse window glow from within. A small square of order. You feel, for a moment, like you've put a lid on the day. Not closed completely, but covered. The next step is the notice. You sit at the bench and pull the larger sheet towards you. You dip the pen, and you write bigger than you like, because Dusk asks for blunt letters. Gate out of order, pay toll at next station. Then you add, if you please, because courtesy oils human hinges better than any bottle. You blot the ink carefully. You don't want it smearing onto someone's hand if they touch it. Then you fold it once, not to hide it, but to carry it. Outside, the far wheels you heard earlier have grown nearer. You can hear the faint squeal of a dry axle and the soft breath of a horse taking the incline. You step out, and you stand where you've stood all afternoon, in the lane, just visible in lantern light. The cart rolls up slow. The driver's face is shadowed by his hat brim, and his eyes flick to the rope at the gate. He sees the lantern and the paper in your hand, and he understands before you speak. He asks, "Is it closed then?" You tell him, "Yes, closed for the night as best as can be done." He nods, but his cart doesn't turn. He's hoping you'll make an exception without him asking for one. You don't dislike him for it. Hope is ordinary. You ask what he's carrying. He says it's a parcel for the far farm, the one past the next gate, and it's wanted tonight. His voice is calm, but there's a tired edge to it, like a man who promised something earlier in the day. This is the moment the clerk's letter didn't solve. "Secure the road at dusk," it said, "because the barrier can't be properly locked. But the road is also a living thing, and living things don't stop neatly on instruction." You look at his cart. It's small, 2 wheels, 1 horse, the sort that can slip through with care. You also look beyond him. The light is fading, and your arm is tired, and you don't want a stream of late traffic testing your rope. So you choose a narrow kindness. Not open for all, just for this one, handled properly. You tell him you can let him through, but only if you take his details and a deposit. Not because you suspect him, because the ledger needs a shape that will make sense tomorrow. He nods quickly, relieved. He digs into his pocket and produces a few coins. Not the full toll, perhaps, but enough to show intent. You take them and hold them a moment, feeling their weight. Then you tell him your questions, name, route, and where he'll return to settle if needed. He answers without complaint. You repeat his name back, and you write it on a fresh line in the ledger. Late cart admitted after closure, deposit taken to be settled. You write it plainly. Plain writing is the difference between kindness and chaos. Now you have to move the timber without letting the rope become a snare. You go to the knot and loosen it carefully, keeping one hand on the arm. The rope slides with a rough whisper. You don't undo it fully. You only slacken it enough to swing the arm open a narrow space. Then you wedge your wooden chock again, not at the base this time, but as a spacer to keep the arm from drifting back too fast. You guide the driver with small motions. A hand to the left, a pause, a step forward. The horse takes it slow, ears flicking in the lantern light. The wheels pass the crooked point, and you watch the rear wheel like you've done all day. It clears with a soft crunch of grit and no knock of timber. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. You swing the arm back across, then you tighten the rope again, pulling until the gate sits firm. The knot settles, and the fibers bite into themselves. The road is closed once more. You lift the notice and nail it to the post with a small tack you keep for such things. The tack goes in with 2 gentle taps from the handle of your knife. You don't hammer hard. Hard blows feel wrong in the evening. When you step back, the lantern light catches the wet ink strokes, making them shine. It looks official enough, not grand but serious. Serious is what you can offer. For a few minutes, nothing comes. No wheels, no hooves. Only the hedges moving slightly, and the distant softened sound of a dog barking at a farmyard. You stand near the gate, listening. It's strange how quiet a road can become, as soon as you tell it no. In the day, it never stops asking. In the evening, it accepts the answer, most of the time. You return to the gatehouse and sit at the bench. Your legs feel heavy in the sudden stillness. Your shoulder throbs now that it no longer has to "I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request," to hold the timber steady and to absorb the road's impatience. You roll your shoulder once, slow and careful, and you feel the muscle answer with a dull pull. On the bench, the ledger lies open where you left it, a page full of the day's tidy phrases. In the lantern light, the ink looks darker, almost raised, as if it could be felt. You take the small deposit coins from your pocket and set them aside in a cup, separate from the day's counted money. Separate is safer, because tomorrow you'll need to show what was toll. and what was only a pledge. You write one more short line under the late cart entry, deposit held in cup, to be transferred at settlement. It isn't required by any printed rule, but it's the kind of extra clarity that keeps a clerk from frowning. Outside, the rope creaks once, a tiny settling sound, as the timber arm relaxes into its lashings. You listen for approaching wheels again, out of habit more than expectation. The road stays quiet. No rattles, no hooves, only the soft hiss of wind in the hedge and the faraway clink of someone closing a gate on a field path. You lift your pen and add the last of your evening sums, just small ones. You total the outstanding slips and write the amount owed in words. You total the coin received after the chain snapped and mark it beside the margin note. This is you building a bridge of ink over a gap in iron. You pause on the foreign silver coin again, still sitting apart. In the lamplight it looks ordinary, until you tilt it and see the unfamiliar markings. You leave it where it is, because the clerk will want to see it with his own eyes. Not because he distrusts you. Because the trust has to account for every kind of money that appears at a gate. A faint sound finally reaches you, not wheels, but voices. Low, carried by the lane, two men talking as they walk. It comes closer, then stops, as if they've reached the notice and are reading it. You hear one of them snort softly, the sound of mild annoyance, not anger. Then you hear the shuffle of boots, turning around. They don't come to the window. They accept the closed gate and choose another way, or another day. That's a small proof that your sign is doing its job. Shh. You stand again, not quickly, and go to the door. The lantern is still steady on the post, throwing its pale oval onto the ruts. The notice sits firm beneath it, held by the tack, its ink now dried to a flat black. You touch the rope with your fingertips, testing tension. It's tight enough to hold through the night, unless someone decides to be foolish. You can't control foolishness. You can only make it inconvenient. You walk the short distance to the gate arm and run your hand along the timber. The new splinter you shaved earlier is smooth now, the wood pale where fresh grain was exposed. You feel the twist in the arm, a slight wrongness that will matter when a new chain is fitted. A twisted arm pulls unevenly, and uneven pulls break hardware faster. You make a note in your mind to tell the clerk it's not only the chain. The timber took a knock too. That's the sort of detail that gets skipped and then repeated as a problem later. Back inside, you lift the kettle and find only a shallow slosh of tea left, cold. Now, you drink it anyway because it's there, and because warmth isn't the only kind of comfort. Sometimes comfort is simply finishing what you started. You set the cup down and close the ink bottle tight. Then you blot the last damp corner of the page, even though the writing is already dry. It's another ritual, and ritual is what turns a long day into something you can put away. You lift the iron cash box and set it back under the bench with both hands. The metal scrapes lightly on stone, then settles. You check the key on your string, feel it with your thumb, and let it fall back against your shirt. A small, familiar weight. A reminder that the trust's money is not your money even when you've held it all day. You sit again, and for a minute you simply listen to the gatehouse. Stone cools fast at night, and you can almost sense it releasing the day's warmth. The stove gives a last faint tick as it contracts. The lantern outside hums very softly, the barely audible sound of flame feeding. Your shoulder continues its slow ache, but the ache now feels like a report, not a crisis. It's your body telling you what you already know, that you worked harder today than the job usually asks. You think ahead, because you have to. Tomorrow, if the chain isn't replaced, you'll still be lashing and guiding. And if the bridge repair continues, the diverted wagons will still come. The clerk said the replacement chain would be discussed, which means meetings and minutes and waiting. The road doesn't wait for minutes to be written. The road arrives whether the trustees are ready or not. You take the clerk's letter from under the paperweight and read it once more. The ink on it is dry and certain, but the instruction is still only words. Close at dusk, it says. as if Dusk is a latch you can turn. You did what you could, rope and lantern and notice. But you also let one cart through, because strictness without sense can become its own kind of breakage. You hope the clerk will understand that, if it ever comes up. Another small sound reaches you, closer this time. A single horse, walking, not trotting, hooves placing carefully on the hardened ruts. It's unhurried, and that makes you lift your head. Unhurried traffic at this hour is often local. Someone who knows the gate and expects you to still be awake. You stand, go to the door, and step out into the lantern's pool of light. A man on horseback comes into view, coat collar up, hat pulled low. He slows at the notice, reads it, and looks toward you without surprise. He says your name, quietly, like he doesn't want to wake the hedges. You recognize him as a small holder from up the lane, someone who pays straight and speaks little. He asks, with plain concern, whether the chain truly snapped. You tell him yes, and you lift the broken end slightly to show it. He leans down in the saddle and peers at the bright torn metal. He makes a soft sound in his throat, the noise men make when they see a familiar kind of wear. He doesn't ask to pass. He says he only came to tell you the trustees will hear about it by morning anyway. He says his cousin sits on a parish committee, and talk travels faster than wagons. You thank him, because the more eyes on the problem, the harder it is to delay. He nods, then turns his horse with a gentle pull on the rein. No toll, no entry, just a small thread of community weaving itself through the job. When he's gone, you tighten the rope once more, just a fraction, and feel the fibers bite. Then you return inside and close the door. The latch catches, and that simple sound feels almost luxurious. A door that closes properly, on the first try. You stand with your hand on the wood for a moment, letting that small success settling you. Now, with the road finally quiet, you do the last work that only happens when nobody is watching. You straighten the stack of settled slips and tie them with a short length of twine. You straighten the outstanding slips too, and tie those separately, because the clerk will want them apart. You write the count of each bundle on a small scrap and tuck it under the twine. This is how you make tomorrow easier for a man who wasn't here today. It's also how you protect yourself, because tidy bundles look like honesty. You turn the ledger page back, just enough to check the earlier entries, the ones before the chain failed. Your handwriting stays consistent all the way through, even where your day didn't. That consistency is a quiet pride, the kind nobody applauds. It's simply the feeling of doing the job the same way, whether it's calm or complicated. And when you reach the line about the exemption token, you pause. It's still unresolved too. The clerk will check it, and someone may be questioned, and the answer may come back next week, or not at all. A toll collector learns to live with unanswered lines. You close the ledger gently, not snapping it shut, because paper doesn't deserve roughness. You slide it into its place on the shelf, away from drafts and lantern soot. Then you take your rag and wipe the sill one last time, removing the day's grit. The rag comes away dark, and you fold it into itself until the worst of it is hidden. Hidden for now, like fatigue. Shouts, the lantern still burns. You consider putting it out, but you leave it a little longer. A light on a closed gate keeps honest people from wasting their time, and keeps the dishonest from thinking nobody's home. You sit again and let your breathing slow. The day has been long, but it has also been contained. Everything that happened has a place in ink, and that means it can be handled. Still, there's one thing ink can't do. Ink can't lift timber. Ink can't pull a chain. Ink can't stop a fast carriage that decides not to pause. You think of that carriage again, the one that slipped through at the moment of failure. You didn't see a crest or a face, only motion and noise. In the ledger, it's reduced to a single honest line, no payment taken. But somewhere beyond your gatehouse, that carriage is only a carriage, and the missing toll is already forgotten. You stand for the final time and step outside to extinguish the lantern. The glass is warm when you touch it, and the metal loop is hotter. You pinch the flame down carefully, lowering it until the light shrinks, then disappears. The sudden darkness makes the road feel larger and less personal. You lift the lantern off its hook and carry it inside, holding it steady so it won't clink. With the lantern gone, the notice is just a pale rectangle on the post, barely visible. But the rope is still there, and the timber is still across. You test it once more with a gentle push, then leave it alone. Some things are better not touched again once they're holding. Inside, you lower your own lamp, the small one meant for the room, not the road. The light becomes softer, more amber, and the corners of the gatehouse deepen into shadow. You hang your coat neatly, because a neat coat in the morning is a small mercy. You set your boots close to the stove, not on it, just near enough that they won't feel like ice at dawn. Then you return to the bench and sit with your hands flat for a moment. Your palms are still faintly metallic smelling, even after wiping. You look at the plain tabletop, at the pen, the twine bundles, the paperweight. Ordinary objects, made significant only by repetition. That's the quiet truth of the job. Tomorrow will begin again with counting and arranging, the same opening ritual. But the middle of the day has changed now. There will be questions, and maybe a trustee will come out to look at the break with his own eyes. There may be a new chain, heavy and black, delivered with a note and a signature. Or there may be another day of rope and chalk, and your shoulder doing the work of iron. You let that uncertainty sit without trying to fix it in your mind. Fixing is for daylight. For now, you only need to leave things in the best order you can. You rise and check the door latch again. You check the window shutter. You check that the clerk's letter